I moved to Belridge because I was tired of being broke in places where everyone could afford to pretend they weren't. Back home in Fresno, I had been sleeping on my cousin's couch, stacking warehouse shifts, and telling my mother I was between things, which was a nice way of saying I was 32 and starting over again. Belridge sat in the dry hills of eastern Oregon, small enough that the gas station clerk learned my name before my debit card stopped smelling like my wallet. Half the storefronts downtown were papered over. The diner closed at 2. At night, the streets went so quiet you could hear the traffic lights clicking. The security job came through a temp agency. Midnight to sunrise, old electrical substation, no patrol beyond the fence unless instructed. Walt Granger, the site manager, shook my hand hard and smiled without showing teeth. "Easy money," he said. "Just stay awake." I wanted to believe him, because I needed easy for once. The control room smelled like burnt dust and old coffee, no matter how many times I wiped the desk. There were 6 monitors, a radio charger, a microwave with yellowed buttons, and a logbook thick with different men's handwriting. I brought gas station burritos, black coffee, and a paperback I never managed to read. My first 2 nights were boring in the way lonely jobs are boring, where every sound feels personal. Transformers hummed outside like a low throat clearing. Wind pushed gravel against the metal siding. Around 4, I would call my mom from the parking lot and tell her I was fine. On my 3rd night, Walt walked me in before shift change. He smelled like cigarettes and mint gum. "Cameras glitch sometimes," he said, tapping monitor 3. "Don't let it get in your head." I laughed because I thought he was joking. Then he looked at me for half a second too long. At 2:17 a.m., camera 4 showed a man walking between the transformers. The gate alarm never made a sound. At first, I thought it was a technician. The man moved slowly, head down, one hand brushing the chain link fence, as if he knew every foot of the place. I grabbed the radio and called it in. Static answered, then a thin click. I checked the gate panel. Green lights across. Locked. No breach. My stomach tightened, but I told myself old systems missed things. I turned on the exterior speaker and said, "This is security. Identify yourself." The man stopped. He was wearing a dark jacket with reflective tape. Same kind as mine. When he turned toward camera 4, the image broke into bars of gray, and for 1 second, the monitor showed an older version of the yard. Scorched concrete, blackened walls, men in hard hats standing in smoke. Then it snapped back. A knock came at the control room door. Not loud, just 2 careful taps. My radio crackled, and a man's voice said, "Arman, do not open that door." I knew that voice from the safety video Walt had shown me. That man had died here 2 years earlier. I backed away so fast my chair hit the wall. The knocking stopped. Whoever was outside shifted, fabric scratching against the door. Through the small wired glass window, I saw a shoulder, then the edge of a name patch. Mine, Arman, stitched in white. My real jacket was on my body, zipped up to my chin. The radio spoke again. Not live, I realized, but clipped and warped. "Do not open that door." Then a cough, then screaming, buried under static. I found the old incident binder in the cabinet because panic makes you practical in strange ways. 2 years earlier, a transformer fire had killed the night supervisor and injured 3 contractors. The lawsuit had blamed operator error. My screens flickered again. Burned hallway. Men staring through smoke. The same footage, looped into the camera system. Then I understood enough to feel cold. Someone had rigged this place to scare me. Maybe to make me quit. Maybe to hide something still happening on site. The door handle turned once. Then Walt's voice came through the hallway, soft and normal. "Arman, open up, buddy." I didn't open it. I pushed the desk against the door and called 911, with hands so slick I almost dropped my phone. Walt kept talking, calm at first, then irritated, then tired. He said I was confused. He said the cameras had done this to other guys. He said nobody would believe a temp worker with anxiety and a messy past. Behind him, another man whispered, "Just get the drive." That was when it stopped being fear and became something heavier. Proof was in the room with me. I yanked the DVR cables, shoved the hard drive under the floor mat, and wrote, because writing was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. The power flickered. Every time it went dark, the backup monitors stayed lit, showing old fire footage, stolen clips, dead men turned into shadows for profit. Police found me at 6:41 a.m., locked inside, hoarse and shaking. Walt was arrested weeks later for covering up illegal copper stripping and tampering with evidence from the fire. I still work nights sometimes, but never alone. And when lights blink during a storm, I remember what I wrote over and over in that logbook, because it was the truest thing I knew in that room. The power goes out, but they stay on. My grandparents died 11 weeks apart, both during the same bitter Ohio winter. Grandpa went first, quietly in his recliner, with the TV still on mute. Grandma followed in February after a stroke that took her voice before it took the rest of her. By spring, the farmhouse on County Road 18 was mine to empty, sell, and survive. I drove there on a gray Friday after work with 2 gas station coffees, a box of contractor bags, and a guilt headache that had started before Columbus was even behind me. I was 36, divorced, childless, and apparently the family member with the most flexible schedule. My sister Emily had 2 kids and a nursing job. My Uncle Ray had opinions, not availability. The house looked smaller than I remembered. White siding gone dull, porch swing hanging crooked. The maple tree Grandpa planted the year I was born still leaned over the driveway like it was listening. Inside, everything smelled like cedar, dust, and the peppermint tea Grandma drank every night. Her slippers were still under the radiator. Grandpa's seed catalog sat in a neat stack beside his chair. I stood there with my keys in my hand, suddenly unable to move. "You're just sorting boxes," I told myself. But upstairs, at the end of the hall, the door Grandma always called the prayer room was still locked. I put off that room for hours. I started in the kitchen because it felt safer. Dishes, expired soup cans, rubber-banded coupons from 2019. Grandma had labeled everything in her careful blue cursive, even junk drawers. Batteries, string, keys we don't know. That was her. Orderly, stubborn, loving in practical ways. She'd press sandwiches into your hands before asking if you were okay. Grandpa was quieter, all weather reports and pocket knives, but he never let my tires go unchecked. By 6, rain had started ticking against the windows. I ate crackers standing over the sink and called Emily. She asked if I was doing all right, which made me lie. "Yeah," I said. "Just weird being here. Don't sleep there if it feels wrong. It's one night." She went quiet, then softer. Grandma hated anyone sleeping alone in that house. I laughed because it was easier than asking what she meant. After we hung up, I found a coffee can of keys in the pantry. One had a strip of masking tape around it with faded writing. Upstairs, the prayer room door opened with a dry click. The air inside felt colder, stale from years of being shut. My flashlight landed on the walls. Dozens of framed family photos hung there, and every face had been scratched away except mine. At first, my brain refused to understand what I was seeing. Wedding photos, Christmas mornings, school portraits, lake trips. My mother's face had been carved into white streaks. Emily's children were gouged out. Grandpa's eyes were erased with something sharp, but my face stayed untouched in every picture. Me at 7 with a missing front tooth. Me at 17 beside my first truck. Me at my wedding, smiling like I still believed in permanence. I backed out so fast I hit the hall table and knocked over a porcelain angel. It shattered on the floor, loud enough to make me swear. I told myself Grandma had been sick. Dementia had made her suspicious toward the end. Maybe she'd done it in confusion. Maybe she'd only recognized me. That explanation lasted until 11:42 that night. I was on the couch under Grandpa's old quilt when I heard humming from the kitchen. Not music from outside, not pipes. Humming, low and tuneless at first, then clear enough that my chest tightened. Grandma's tea song, the same little melody she used whenever the kettle warmed. I crept down the hallway barefoot, phone in my hand, the screen trembling light over the floorboards. The kettle was boiling on the stove. 2 mugs sat on the table. Between them was a note in Grandma's handwriting. "You should not have slept alone." Then the wall phone rang. The landline had been disconnected. I knew because I'd called the company myself before driving out. Still, that beige kitchen phone screamed against the wall until I picked it up with a hand that barely felt attached to me. A man whispered, "Your family never owned that house." I couldn't speak. "They were allowed to stay," he said. "Same as you." The line went dead. I ran outside in the rain and sat in my car for almost an hour. Doors locked, heater blasting, watching the farmhouse windows. Nothing moved. No shadows. No face behind glass. Just that old house, sitting there like it had all the patience in the world. By sunrise, fear had curdled into anger. I went back in with a tire iron and checked the kitchen. The back door lock had fresh scratches around it. In the mudroom, behind Grandpa's coats, I found a narrow panel cracked open. It led to the old cellar stairs, the ones I thought had been sealed years ago. Dust covered the upstairs bedroom floor when I returned to grab my bag. Around the bed where I'd slept were footprints. Not random. Not mine. They circled the couch cushions I'd dragged upstairs earlier, heel to toe, again and again, like someone had stood over me deciding what to do next. In the closet, I found a small speaker taped behind a storage bin. The police came because I refused to leave without making someone look. A deputy named Wallace found more than I did. A sleeping roll in the cellar, canned food, batteries, copies of our family photos, a notebook full of dates, including the day Grandma entered hospice and the hour Grandpa's ambulance left the driveway. The man was not a ghost. His name was Aaron Pike. He was the grandson of the family who'd owned the farm before my grandparents bought it, through a handshake deal that never got recorded correctly. He'd been fighting the estate quietly for years, living in the hidden cellar during stretches when Grandma was alone, feeding her fear, convincing her the house was never truly ours. The note wasn't supernatural either. He had copied her handwriting from recipe cards. That somehow made it worse. I didn't sell the farmhouse. Not right away. I let investigators tear open walls and crawl spaces until the house looked wounded. Emily and I burned the scratched photographs in a metal barrel behind the barn, both of us crying without looking at each other. Weeks later, the real estate agent sent a final exterior photo for the listing. In the upstairs window stood a thin figure in one of Grandma's old housecoats, one hand raised, pointing behind the photographer's reflection. It was only fabric on a hanger, the deputy said later. Maybe he was right, but I still check every window in every room I enter, because grief didn't haunt that house. Someone used it as a doorway. I never planned to be a radio host. I used to tell people that like it was a joke, but it was mostly an apology. In a town like Mercer Falls, everyone knew what you were doing before you did. And somehow I had become the woman who talked softly to truck drivers, lonely retirees, night nurses, and insomniacs between midnight and 5. The station sat behind a closed pharmacy and a dentist's office, in a low brick building that smelled like dust, burnt coffee, and old carpet whenever it rained. WAT MRF 93.7. Your home for weather, classics, and company after dark. That was the slogan printed on the cracked plastic sign outside. My boss, Dennis, called the overnight shift quiet money. He was wrong about the quiet part. The building made little sounds all night, pipes ticking, wind pressing against the windows, the refrigerator in the break room coughing itself awake. After a while, those sounds became familiar enough to feel like roommates. My dad hated that I worked alone. He had been a cop for 26 years before his knees gave out, and retirement only made him more suspicious of the world. "You locked the back door?" he asked every evening when I called before work. "Yes." "Front?" "Yes." "Don't humor me, Elena. I'm not. I lock both." He would grunt like he believed me halfway. Then he'd ask if I'd eaten. Then I'd lie and say yes. That night, a storm rolled in before 10, dragging branches across the parking lot like fingernails, and I remember thinking it felt nice to be needed by someone, even if it was only a town full of strangers listening in the dark. Then the phone line lit up. Most callers were harmless. A man named Carl requested the same Elvis song every Thursday. A woman from County Road 8 called whenever the forecast said light rain, and her ditch flooded anyway. Sometimes teenagers tried to get me to say stupid things live, but I learned to recognize that breathless giggling before the first word. The first call after midnight was Carl. I put on "Can't Help Falling in Love," checked the storm radar, and watched rain smear the studio window until the parking lot lights looked doubled and watery. My reflection hovered over the glass, pale and tired, headphones denting my hair. Around 1:13, the request line blinked again. "What MRF? You're with Elena." For a second, there was only static and breathing. "Hello?" I said, already reaching for the disconnect button. A woman whispered, "Please don't hang up." I stopped. Her voice sounded close to breaking, not dramatic, not drunk, just small, like she was trying to hide the fact that she was crying by swallowing every breath. "Okay," I said, softer. "I'm here. Are you safe?" "No." That one word changed the room. The rain got louder. My chair creaked under me as I sat straighter. "Can you tell me what happened?" She sniffed, then whispered, "I'm in a house. I don't know whose. I woke up here. I think someone's inside." I pulled the notepad closer. "Do you know the address?" No, I can't see outside." "Are you hurt?" "I don't know. My head hurts. I'm in a closet, I think. He's walking around." My fingers were shaking by then, but training from years of dead air emergencies kicked in. "Keep them talking. Don't panic on mic. Don't make promises. What's your name?" She didn't answer. In the background, something bumped softly, once, like a drawer closing in another room. Then she whispered, "He just opened another door." I muted the studio mic and grabbed my cell phone with my other hand. Calling 911 while keeping her on the station line felt clumsy, like trying to hold two glasses that were already spilling. The dispatcher asked where the emergency was. "That's what I'm trying to find out," I said, too fast. "She's on our call-in line. She says she's trapped in a house." The woman breathed into my ear. "Ma'am," I said to her, "I have emergency services on the line. They need anything you can give me. Street name, house color, sounds nearby, anything." "I can't," she said. "You can. Just look around." "I can't move." The dispatcher's voice stayed calm. "Ask if she sees mail, papers, prescription bottles." I repeated it. The woman started crying harder, but quietly, like she was terrified crying itself would get her killed. "There's carpet. It smells like cigarettes. There's music somewhere." "What kind of music?" "I don't know. Old music." That hit wrong in my stomach. The station was playing an old Patsy Cline track on low in my headphones. I turned the monitor down. "Can you hear rain?" I asked. "Yes, that's good. That means maybe you're nearby." "Can you see a window?" "No." A long silence followed. Then she said, "Your coffee mug is chipped." I looked at the desk. My mug sat beside the soundboard. White ceramic, red handle, a crack running down one side from when Dennis dropped it 2 years earlier. "What did you say?" I asked. "The red light is on," she whispered, "the one above the microphone." My skin went cold so quickly it almost hurt. Behind the glass, the on-air sign glowed red against the dark hallway. The dispatcher said, "Elena? What is she saying?" But the woman was already whispering again. "He's closer now." I told myself she could hear the station somehow. Maybe she had been here before. Maybe someone was watching the live stream webcam we used for sponsors, though Dennis had sworn it was disabled. My brain threw explanations at me because the alternative was too large and dark to stand inside. "Who are you?" I asked. The woman gave a wet, shaky breath. "Elena," the dispatcher said through my cell. "Stay where you are. Officers are heading to the station." I hadn't given them the station address. They already knew it. Small town. The woman whispered, "Don't look yet." Every muscle in my body locked. "Don't look where?" A sound came through the station line. Not static, not rain. It was the faint scrape of something brushing carpet. I heard it in the phone, and, half a second later, in the room, from beneath the desk. I stared at the black gap under the console where my knees were tucked. My shoes were planted on the floor. The chair wheels pressed into the carpet. There was no room for a person under there. Not really. "Ma'am," I said, but my voice cracked into something younger. She whispered, "I'm under your desk." I jerked back so hard my headphones snapped against my neck. The chair hit the wall. I looked down. Nothing. Only tangled cords, a dust-clogged power strip, and the shadow of my own shaking legs. Then the studio phone rang again. Not the request line, the private line. The number only Dennis, my dad, and the sheriff's office had. I let it ring 3 times while the dispatcher kept saying my name. Finally, I answered. At first, all I heard was sobbing. Then my own voice said, "Please, whoever is working tonight, don't answer the next call." I don't remember standing up. I only remember the studio feeling suddenly too small for all the sound in it. Rain on glass, static in my headphones. The dispatcher ordering me to leave the room. My own voice on the private line, crying so hard the words barely held together. "Please," it said. "He waits until you're alone." I backed toward the hallway, watching the desk like something might unfold from under it if I blinked. The on-air sign buzzed above the door. I had left the mic live. Somewhere out there, half the county could hear my breathing. The private line clicked dead. Then, from the request line still open on the board, the first woman whispered, "He heard you." I ran. I didn't feel brave. I didn't feel smart. I slammed through the hallway, past framed photos of men who had hosted morning shows before I was born, past the break room with its sour coffee smell, toward the front door. It didn't open. The deadbolt was turned, but something outside held the handle firm. A shadow moved across the frosted glass. Not a ghost. Not a monster. A man, average height, raincoat hood pulled low, one hand pressed flat against the door like he was listening through it. I ducked into the storage closet and called my dad. I didn't whisper his name until he answered. I said, "Dad, someone's here," and for once he didn't ask if I was sure. Police found the back door propped open with a flathead screwdriver. They found muddy footprints in the hall, a cut phone cable, and an old reel-to-reel tape machine plugged into the auxiliary board. The calls from 1978 were real recordings, spliced and timed by someone who knew the station better than I did. They never found him. I quit radio after that. For months, silence scared me more than noise. But I learned something ugly and useful. Safe places are only safe when we keep questioning them, and sometimes survival begins with admitting that the strange feeling in your stomach is trying to save your life. My name is Nolan Pierce, and back then I was the youngest deputy in Mercer County, which mostly meant I got the shifts nobody with seniority wanted. I was 27, divorced before I had learned how to be married, and living above my uncle's closed hardware store with a mattress, a microwave, and a coffee maker that sounded like it was dying every morning. Mercer wasn't much, just soybean fields, 2 diners, a feed store, and a courthouse square that smelled like wet brick when it rained. I liked the quiet, though. After growing up with a father who spoke mostly in slammed cabinets, quiet felt like peace. Sheriff Doolin treated me like a nephew he was disappointed in but still willing to feed. He chewed peppermint gum, kept his boots polished, and said, "Slow is smooth." every time I rushed paperwork. Deputy Maria Hodge was the opposite, sharp and calm, the kind of person who could make a drunk apologize while she cuffed him. That night, the rain started before sunset, hard enough to blur the windows. By midnight, every unit except me was headed to a pileup on Route 18, and Maria tossed me the station keys. "Don't burn the place down," she said. I smiled and said, "That's your job." Then the front door rattled in the wind. At first, I thought the latch had popped loose. The station was an old one-story block building with bad seals around every door, and storms made it breathe like a tired animal. I was alone behind the front desk, listening to rain hammer the roof and dispatch chatter fade in and out. The lobby lights buzzed. Somewhere in the back, a pipe knocked every few minutes, like a fist inside the wall. At 1:15 a.m., someone pressed both palms against the glass front door. She was an old woman, small and soaked through, wearing a tan raincoat buttoned wrong. Water ran off her gray hair and pooled around her shoes. I moved fast, because no matter how strange somebody looks at one in the morning, you don't leave them standing in a storm. "Ma'am, come in," I said, opening the door. She smelled like rain, cold clothes, and something faintly sour, like old smoke. Her hands shook around the coffee I gave her. I asked her name, then her address, then if she needed medical help. "My daughter," she whispered. "Where is she?" She stared past me toward the dark hallway. "She is alone in the house again." Something about "again" made the room feel colder. I tried to keep my voice gentle. That was something Maria had taught me. When people are scared, you don't crowd them with questions. You give them one thing to answer: name, street, phone number. But the woman only rocked slightly in the chair, dripping onto the tile, repeating that sentence until it stopped sounding like a plea and started sounding memorized. I pulled up the county records terminal. "Can you tell me your name, ma'am?" She looked at me like she was waking up. "Evelyn Rusk." The name meant nothing to me until the search returned an archived case file. Rusk, Evelyn May, arrested October 1989. The file photo loaded slowly, line by line, and the face that appeared was the same face, sitting 15 feet away, older only in the way paper gets old. The report said she had been arrested during a storm, after neighbors called about a child screaming. Her daughter, 8-year-old Lacey Rusk, was found dead in their home. Evelyn died by suicide in holding cell 2 before trial. My mouth went dry. I looked up from the screen. The chair in the lobby was empty, rocking gently, with a puddle beneath it, and one wet footprint leading toward the back hallway. The power failed before I could stand. Not all at once, but in a sick little stutter, lights blinking white, black, white, then emergency red. The station changed under that color. The walls looked raw. The framed charity photos looked like strangers watching me from behind glass. I drew my sidearm because training is sometimes just fear with a checklist. "Sheriff's office," I called. "Ma'am." Then every phone in the building rang. Front desk, booking, dispatch line, interview room, evidence office. The sound came from everywhere, sharp and overlapping, until I couldn't tell which direction was real. I grabbed the nearest receiver. A little girl was crying on the line, not screaming, crying quietly, like she was trying not to be heard. "Mom?" she whispered. I dropped the phone so hard it bounced against the desk. The same voice played from another line, then another, staggered by half a second. I followed it down the hall, because I couldn't make myself stay still. Holding cell 2 was empty. Door open, floor dry. The wet footprints passed it and stopped at the evidence room. That door was supposed to be locked. It was open 3 inches. Inside, something clicked, rewound, and began to play. The evidence room smelled like cardboard, dust, and damp concrete. On the center table sat a gray archive box labeled Rusk 1989, its seal cut clean. Inside were photographs turned face down, a child's plastic bracelet, and a cassette marked Home Alone Call. I should have waited for backup. I know that now. But fear can make you stupid, and guilt can make you worse. I pressed play. The girl's crying came first, then a dispatcher's voice from 30 years ago, then another sound underneath it, fresh and close. My own voice, screaming, "Help me, please. She's in here." I stumbled back and hit the shelf. A handheld recorder fell from behind the box, still running, red light blinking. That was when I saw the wire clipped into the station phone system. Someone had been feeding the old call through every line, while recording me in real time. We found Evelyn's niece 2 days later, in an abandoned rental outside town. She had spent years convinced the county buried mistakes in that case, and maybe parts of that were true, but truth mixed with obsession becomes its own kind of locked room. I left law enforcement the next spring. I still hear phones ring in my sleep sometimes, not because of ghosts, because people in pain can haunt a place all by themselves. I was 28, and still junior enough at Channel 6 to get the weekend shifts nobody wanted. Mostly I cut weather bumps, town council arguments, ribbon cuttings, and interviews where people said community 7 times in 30 seconds. The newsroom sat behind a strip mall pharmacy in northern Indiana, all buzzing fluorescent lights, stale coffee, and carpet that smelled wet whenever it rained. I liked it anyway. After my mom's surgery that spring, steady work felt like a blessing, even if my boss, Frank, called me kiddo and forgot I had a degree. That Saturday, I came in alone with a gas station sandwich and my hoodie still damp from cold drizzle. My older brother texted, "You eating real food?" I sent him a picture of chips and lied. Obviously, the assignment was simple: clean up an old documentary segment about St. Agnes Church, abandoned since the 1970s, for a Halloween rerun package. I opened the archive drive, dragged the footage into my timeline, and heard the building's back door click shut somewhere behind me. I told myself it was the HVAC. That building made noises like an old man getting out of a recliner. I kept working. The church footage was grainy but normal at first. Cracked stained glass, sagging pews, weeds pressing through the floorboards. Our former reporter, Elise, stood in a raincoat outside the entrance, talking about rumors of a secret religious group that had used the basement in the 70s. It was local spooky stuff, harmless enough for late-night TV. I'd met Elise once before she quit. She was sharp, tired, always tapping a pen against her teeth. In one clip she laughed off camera and said, "Frank, this place is disgusting." That made me smile. It felt human, a little piece of newsroom life from before I got there. Then I saw the man. He was in the back pew, half hidden by shadow, wearing a brown coat and sitting too straight. I scrubbed back. Same shot, same man, different angle, still there. In the next clip, filmed in daylight according to the metadata, he was standing near the side aisle, facing the lens. When I zoomed in, his mouth moved slowly, forming 2 silent syllables. Maya. My first thought was that I was exhausted. I'd been staring at screens for 6 hours, eating vending machine pretzels, listening to rain tap the newsroom windows like fingernails. I replayed the clip 10 times. Maybe he was saying, "May I?" or "Hey, or nothing at all. But his eyes stayed fixed on the camera, and my stomach kept tightening. I called Frank, straight to voicemail. I called Elise, from the old contact sheet taped inside the archive cabinet, expecting the number to be dead. She answered on the 5th ring, sounding cautious. "Who is this?" "Maya from Channel 6. Sorry, I'm editing your St. Agnes piece and there's a man in the footage." The silence went long. "Elise, get out of the building," she said. "What? Is the file called Church? Rav? Fainal?" I looked at the folder name. My mouth went dry. "Yes, that wasn't the final," she whispered. "That's the copy I told Frank to destroy." Before I could ask why, the office lights dimmed, and a new folder appeared on my screen. The folder was titled Window, Feed. I hadn't imported it. Nobody else was logged in, at least not that I could see. My hands went cold as I clicked the first clip. It showed the Channel 6 building from across the parking lot, filmed through rain. My little silver Honda was in the corner of the frame. The second clip was closer, from beside the dumpster. The third was taken through the newsroom window. I could see my own back, hunched over the editing desk, ponytail crooked, one sneaker tucked under my chair the way I always sat when I was tired. I stood so fast my chair rolled into the wall. The newsroom felt too bright and too empty. Monitors glowed. The police scanner hissed softly. Somewhere beyond the glass, a car idled and then went quiet. I called 911 with my thumb slipping on the screen. The dispatcher told me to stay inside, lock the doors, and move away from the windows. While she was still talking, another clip loaded by itself. It showed my desk from behind me, and in that video, the man from the church stood 3 feet from my chair. I turned around so hard I nearly fell. Nobody was there, just the dark hallway, the copier, the trophy case full of awards nobody dusted, but my computer kept exporting. The progress bar crawled across the screen under a file titled Broadcast Tonight. The police arrived in 6 minutes. They found a transmitter taped beneath the conference table, a spare key missing from Frank's desk, and muddy prints by the rear entrance. 2 days later, they arrested Carl Mercer, our part-time building maintenance guy. He'd worked at the station back when Elise filmed St. Agnes. His father had been tied to that church group, and Carl had been quietly deleting, swapping, and saving footage for years. He wasn't a monster in a mask. He was the man who fixed our light switches, refilled the paper towels, asked if my mom was feeling better. The final thumbnail was fake, a crude edit of my face pasted over an old church image, black cloth over my eyes. Still, I kept seeing it every time I closed my laptop. I quit Channel 6 a month later. I still edit video, but never alone at night, and never with my back to a window. Privacy is strange that way. Once someone turns your life into footage, silence never feels empty again. I took the job because I was tired of pretending I had better options. I was 32, newly divorced, behind on my truck payment, and sleeping in the spare room at my sister's place in Ohio, while her kids whispered about me like I was a guest who had overstayed. So when a temporary position opened at a funeral home 3 counties south, I said yes before asking too many questions. Calder and Sons Funeral Home sat outside a rural town called Bellwether, though as far as I could tell there were no sons and barely a town. The building was old brick, 2 stories, with white columns out front and a gravel parking lot that turned muddy whenever it rained. Inside, it smelled like floor polish, lilies, and that cold, powdery air hospitals have after visiting hours. Mr. Calder was 70 at least, thin as a coat hanger, with careful hands and a voice that never rose above polite. He showed me how to fold chairs, vacuum the viewing room, carry flower stands without tipping them, and speak quietly when families arrived. People remember tone, he told me, not words. Tone. The apartment above the home was small but clean. A bed, a shower, a microwave, and one window facing the cemetery behind the property. That first evening, Calder handed me the keys and paused at the door. "One rule after midnight," he said. "If you hear footsteps downstairs, stay in your room." I laughed, because I thought he was joking. He didn't laugh back. I called my sister after he left. She had the kids brushing their teeth, and I could hear water running and someone crying because toothpaste was too spicy. It made me miss the chaos more than I expected. "You okay there?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, looking around at the beige walls and the old radiator under the window. "It's quiet. That's good, right?" "I think so." She hesitated. My sister, Mina, had always been the practical one. She clipped coupons, remembered birthdays, and could hear a lie through a locked door. "Just don't let them take advantage of you, Ravi. It's folding chairs and answering phones. You say that like weird people don't die too." After we hung up, I ate gas station chili from a plastic bowl and watched rain crawl down the window. The funeral home settled underneath me, creaking in small ways. Pipes ticked, wind pushed against the old glass. Somewhere below, a flower cooler hummed like a tired refrigerator. At 11:45, I checked the little security monitor Calder had left on the kitchen counter. 4 camera angles showed the front hall, the viewing room, the prep room door, and the back entrance. Everything looked empty and gray. I brushed my teeth, changed into sweatpants, and told myself Mr. Calder's rule was just an old man's superstition. Then, at 12:07, I heard the first footstep below me. Not a creak, a footstep. I stood beside the bed with my toothbrush still in my hand, listening so hard my ears started to ring. Another step followed, slow, measured. Across the viewing room ceiling beneath my floor, I told myself it was Calder. Maybe he forgot something. Maybe rural funeral directors came and went at strange hours because death didn't respect business hours. I grabbed my phone anyway. The footsteps stopped. Then came a soft scraping sound, chair legs dragging over carpet. I moved to the kitchen counter and tapped the security monitor awake. At first, the viewing room showed nothing but rows of empty chairs and 2 standing arrangements of white carnations near the front. The casket was there too, open, polished dark wood, empty like it had been when I helped Calder dust around it earlier. The camera flickered. When the picture came back, people were sitting in the chairs. I leaned closer, my breath fogging the small screen. Maybe 10 or 12 of them, men in dark coats. Women with umbrellas resting against their knees. Nobody spoke. Nobody turned around. They all faced the casket. My phone buzzed so hard in my hand I nearly dropped it. A text from Mr. Calder. Do not go downstairs. Do not speak. Do not let them know you're alive. I stared at the words until they stopped looking like English. Then, from below, someone cleared their throat like a service was about to begin. I locked the apartment door, then stood there feeling stupid, because the lock was cheap and hollow, the kind that came with old rental units and could be opened with a credit card. My hands were damp. The apartment smelled suddenly sour, like old coffee and fear. On the monitor, a man stepped into view beside the casket. He was broad, wearing a black suit that didn't fit right at the shoulders. He held a folded paper in both hands. "We're gathered tonight," he said. His voice came faintly through the floorboards before it came through the monitor speaker. That was what made my stomach drop. It wasn't a recording. The camera flickered again. For half a second, the casket looked empty. Then it wasn't. A man lay inside wearing my gray hoodie, my beard, my face, or close enough in that grainy black and white image that my knees nearly gave out. I touched my own mouth to make sure I was still standing there, still breathing, still warm. My phone buzzed again. Calder. They use names first, then belongings, then a body if they can get one. I typed, "What is this?" Before I could hit send, 3 soft knocks landed on my apartment door. A woman outside said gently, "Mr. Patel, the family would like to come up and say goodbye." I didn't answer. I sat on the bathroom floor with my back against the tub, one hand clamped over my mouth, the other holding a kitchen knife that felt embarrassingly small. The knocking came twice more, always polite. No yelling, no breaking in. Somehow that made it worse. Around 3, I heard them moving through the hallway outside my door, papers sliding across wood, a murmur of voices. Once, someone whispered my name, like they were reading it from a list. I wanted to call 911, but my phone had 1 bar, and every call failed. Calder never answered again. Near dawn, engines started outside, doors closed. Gravel crunched under tires. Then the building went quiet in that heavy way a place gets after people leave. I waited until sunlight reached the bathroom tile before I opened the apartment door. Black funeral programs covered the hallway floor from wall to wall. I picked one up with fingers that didn't feel like mine. Ravi Patel, beloved brother, uncle, and friend Sunrise. 1991 sunset. Tonight police came after I walked half a mile to a farmhouse and used their landline. By then, Calder was gone. So were the mourners. The casket downstairs was empty again, except for my hoodie folded neatly inside. I never got answers that made sense, but I learned this: some doors are warnings, and some jobs cost more than money can fix. Now, when a place feels wrong, I leave before I understand why. I moved to Belridge with 2 suitcases, a used Corolla, and the kind of optimism you only get when you are 24 and still think a low salary means character building. My first real job was at the Belridge County Ledger, a newspaper office wedged between a pharmacy and a closed shoe store. My editor, Marcy, drank lukewarm tea from a chipped mug and told me small-town journalism was mostly obituaries, school board arguments, and learning who not to quote after 3 beers. I loved it anyway. My mom called every night and asked if I was eating. My dad asked about parking, locks, and whether I had bought pepper spray. Bellwether Arms was all I could afford. The landlord, Mr. Voss, was polite in a tired way, with nicotine fingers and a limp he blamed on roofing work. He said the unit below mine was under renovation, so I might hear noise. I signed because the rent was cheap. The top floor had sunlight, and I wanted so badly for my new life to start that I ignored how empty the building felt after dark. On my 4th night, the dragging started below my bedroom floor. At first I told myself it was pipes. Old buildings make old building sounds, and I had grown up in a ranch house where the heater knocked like somebody trapped in the wall. But this was different. It was slow and deliberate, like a heavy dresser being pulled in circles across bare wood. I muted my laptop and sat very still on my mattress, listening to the rain tick against the window air conditioner. The smell of dust came up through the floor vent, mixed with something damp and metallic. I texted Marcy because I didn't want to call my parents and prove I was still somebody's scared kid. She wrote back, "Renovation guys are weird. Lock your door." The sound stopped around midnight. I laughed at myself, made tea, and tried to read tomorrow's police blotter notes. Then, right under my bed, came 3 taps. Not from the hallway, not from the wall, from beneath me. I stepped off the mattress so fast my heel hit the bed frame, and the tapping came again, softer this time, like someone answering. Mr. Voss picked up on the 5th ring, sounding thick with sleep. I apologized before I even explained, which still embarrasses me. Women do that sometimes, make ourselves smaller while asking for help. "There's someone working downstairs," I said, "or moving things." I heard knocking. There was a pause long enough that I checked if the call dropped. "Downstairs where?" he asked. "Below me, the renovation unit." His voice changed, not scared exactly, but careful. "Leah, nobody should be in there. That apartment's been sealed for 10 years. I sat on the edge of the bed with my phone pressed hard to my ear. "You told me it was being renovated." I said the plumbing stack was being worked on, not the unit. "Stay in your apartment. I'm coming over." After we hung up, I got down on my hands and knees by the floor vent. I don't know why. Maybe because fear needs proof. Below, through the dusty slats, a dim yellow light glowed in an empty room. A woman stood in it, face tilted up toward me. Then she smiled and whispered, "You're walking too loud." I ran without shoes, without my keys, without the pepper spray my dad had mailed me still sealed in plastic. The hallway lights flickered as I slammed my door behind me. The building smelled like wet plaster and hot wires. I grabbed the stair rail and started down, but the landing below was black, darker than it should have been, like every bulb had burned out at once. My bare foot hit something soft on the step, a strip of insulation, then another. Someone had opened the wall panels along the stairwell. From below came a woman's voice, calm and irritated. "You woke me up." I backed upward, crying so hard I could barely breathe. My phone had no signal. The emergency exit door at the roof level was chained from the outside. That was when I heard Mr. Voss in the lobby, not calling my name, but talking to someone else. "She wasn't supposed to look," he said. A second voice answered, low and female. "She already signed." I crouched behind a trash bin on the top landing, shaking, while footsteps started climbing toward me. I got out through a maintenance window no wider than a dog door. I tore skin off my shoulder doing it, and landed on the fire escape hard enough to bruise my ribs. Rain washed grit into my mouth as I climbed down 3 stories and dropped behind the building. I ran to the street and sat under the weak orange glow of a parking meter until a patrol car found me at dawn. Police opened the apartment below mine that morning. It wasn't sealed. It had been hidden. The missing tenant from 10 years earlier had died there, and Voss had used the empty unit for off-book rentals to people who couldn't pass applications, people nobody came looking for quickly. The woman I saw was one of them, half-starved, paranoid, and convinced I had been sent to force her out. On her table was a receipt book. My name was written on the next slip, copied from my lease. Voss took a plea. The woman went to a hospital, then somewhere safer. I moved back home for 6 months and hated needing it, until I understood survival is not failure. I still walk softly in apartments, not because I believe in ghosts, but because some places keep human secrets under the floorboards, and sometimes they answer. I hadn't been back to my father's village in 12 years, not since my grandmother's funeral, when I was still young enough to hate the dust and old enough to pretend I didn't miss her. I grew up in New Jersey, in an apartment above my father's grocery store, where the nights smelled like onions, floor cleaner, and the fried snacks my mother made for regulars who stayed too long. The village existed in our family like an old photograph, always mentioned, rarely visited. My father called it home, even after 30 years in America. I called it a place where my phone barely worked. My uncle Farouk was the one who asked me to go. He had stayed behind, looking after the property, the land records, the cousins who fought over boundary walls like they were national borders. He was a practical man, thin as a broom handle, with a voice that always sounded annoyed, but eyes that softened when he saw family. "Just one night, Rehan," he said over the phone. "Workers are coming in the morning. I don't want the house empty with tools inside." I had flown in to help my parents with paperwork after my father's heart surgery in Lahore, and I felt guilty enough to say yes. By late afternoon, I was standing in front of the old family house with my duffel bag, listening to crows in the neem trees and distant motorbikes fading toward the main road. The village looked peaceful until sunset. Then the fields went black, the lanes emptied, and beyond the trees, the abandoned chapel became a square shadow against the sky. The house still had my grandmother's smell in it, even after all those years. Not perfume exactly, more like dried mint, old quilts, and smoke from the clay stove she'd refused to stop using. The front room had cracked green walls, and a ceiling fan that clicked on every rotation. My uncle had left a mattress downstairs, a thermos of tea, and a plate of parathas wrapped in foil. His kindness always came disguised as instructions. "Lock this bolt first," he said, tapping the front door. "Then the bottom one. Don't use the side door. It sticks. What about upstairs?" "Nothing up there except trunks. Your bag can go in the corner room if you want, but sleep downstairs." He said it casually, but he didn't look toward the stairs. Before leaving, he walked me around the courtyard, pointing out where rainwater had damaged the plaster and where the workers would start repairs. Past the back wall, the land dipped toward fields and a cluster of wild trees. I could see the chapel roof through them, its cross bent slightly to one side. I asked who used it. "No one," he said. "Not for years." "Then why is it still there?" He shrugged. "Some things people stop using but don't remove." After dinner, I called my mother. She told me to keep my socks on because old floors hold sickness. My father came on the line, tired but cheerful, asking if the mango tree still leaned over the well. For a while, hearing them made the house feel less empty. Then the village power cut out, and the fan stopped clicking. In the silence, from somewhere beyond the gate, an old woman began to cry. At first, the sound was so soft I thought it was a goat or a child whining in sleep. The village had noises I wasn't used to: dogs barking in chains, insects buzzing against screens, metal gates shifting in the wind. I sat still on the mattress, phone flashlight on my knee, waiting for the crying to become something ordinary. It didn't. It became clearer. A woman was sobbing outside the house, slow and broken, like she was trying not to wake anyone. I checked the time. 12:17 a.m. The lane beyond the courtyard had no streetlights. The moon was thin, and the fields swallowed most of the light. I went to the front window and parted the curtain just enough to see the gate. She stood there in a white shawl, hunched forward, one hand covering her face. She looked small, elderly, maybe someone's mother who had wandered out confused. The fear in me loosened into pity. "Beta," she called. "Son, open the door. I lost my way." Her voice was shaking and old. Then she spoke again, and it was lower, almost like a man's whisper. "I am from the next village. Please." I froze with my fingers still on the curtain. She cried again, but the cry changed too. Younger, then rougher, like several people were taking turns behind the same shawl. My phone showed one weak bar. I called my uncle anyway. He answered after the first ring, awake and breathing hard. "Rayhan," he said, "listen carefully. Do not answer her again." I didn't. I almost... "Don't look at her feet," he said, "and don't let her hear you pray." Right then, the woman stopped crying and lifted her covered face toward my window. I backed away from the window so fast my shoulder hit the wall. My uncle kept talking, low and urgent, but the call crackled in and out. "Stay downstairs. Keep lights off. If she hears where you are, she'll keep trying." "Who is she?" I whispered. "Not she. People. Maybe one, maybe more. They watch empty houses. They use old women's voices. They know men open doors for crying." That made more sense than anything else, and somehow it frightened me more. A ghost would not need a bolt cutter. A person would. The crying started again, this time at the front door, not at the gate anymore. I heard cloth brush against wood, then fingertips drag lightly over the metal latch. A soft knock came next, careful and patient. "Rayhan," she said. My name in that stranger's mouth made my stomach fold in on itself. I didn't ask my uncle how she knew. I remembered the mechanic at the bus stop who had asked whose son I was, the tea seller who had watched my uncle hand me the keys, the two boys on a motorbike who slowed outside the house at sunset. In villages, privacy leaks through every wall. Then a sound came from upstairs, a single sob. I held the phone against my chest and looked at the ceiling. My duffel bag was up there in the corner room, exactly where my uncle had told me not to sleep. Another sob followed, louder, from inside the house. My uncle's voice returned through the speaker, sharp and terrified. "Rayhan, what was that?" Then something upstairs moved across the floorboards. I spent the rest of the night locked in the small pantry off the kitchen, with a rusted sickle across my knees. It sounds ridiculous now, but in that moment it was the only solid thing I had. My uncle stayed on the phone until his battery died, whispering that he was coming at first light with neighbors. Above me, someone walked slowly from room to room. Once, I heard my duffel zipper open. Once, I heard a woman laugh under her breath, but it sounded practiced, like someone copying fear from a movie. At dawn, the village call to prayer rose faintly from far away, and the house went still. I waited until I heard my uncle shouting outside before I moved. When I opened the pantry door, my legs shook so badly I had to hold the wall. The chapel bell rang once across the fields. Later, the villagers swore it hadn't worked in 20 years, but Farouk found a fresh rope tied to its rusted lever, running through brush toward the back of our property. Whoever had been there wanted the sound to feel impossible. Inside the house, muddy handprints marked every window from the inside. The side door lock had been picked cleanly, and my bag upstairs had been emptied onto the floor. Scratched into the front door with a nail was one sentence: "He heard me, so I can come back." My uncle sold the house 6 months later. I signed the papers from New Jersey with my father sitting beside me, silent and pale. I used to think fear belonged to dark fields and old chapels. Now I know it can belong to people who study kindness, grief, and family names, then wait outside your door wearing whatever voice will make you open it. I was 33 that summer, driving deliveries across Nevada for a medical supply company out of Reno. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid on time, and after my divorce, that mattered more than pride. I had a daughter, Lily, who lived with her mom in Carson City, and every mile I drove felt like another small payment toward being the kind of father who still showed up. I kept her drawings taped above my glove box. One was a purple truck with wings. She said it was so I could get home faster. That Friday, I was hauling box dialysis filters to a clinic near St. George. The highway was mostly empty. The desert stretched flat and pale under a sky that looked too big, and my old box truck had been running hot since Tonopah. I told myself I could make it to the next real town. I didn't. Just after sunset, the engine coughed hard, lost power, and rolled me onto the shoulder near a motel sign with half the letters burned out. The place was called Desert Crown. 6 rooms, gravel lot, soda machine, office light flickering yellow. The manager gave me room 6 and said, "Don't open the connecting door." The manager's name was Earl, according to the plastic badge clipped crooked on his shirt. He was maybe 60, with watery blue eyes and nicotine stains on 2 fingers. He wasn't rude, exactly, just tired in a way that made every sentence sound like it had been used too many times. "What's next door?" I asked, signing the register. "Nothing you need," he said. Then he softened a little. "Old damage. Rooms sealed. Owner won't spend money fixing what nobody rents. Room 6 smelled like bleach, old carpet, and the little wrapped soaps motels buy by the case. The bedspread was stiff, the air conditioner rattled like loose change, and the framed desert print above the TV hung slightly crooked. I called dispatch, then Lily. She told me about a loose tooth and asked if Nevada had scorpions in the beds. I checked under the blanket just to make her laugh. After we hung up, the silence settled hard. No traffic, no voices, just the AC and the ticking truck outside as it cooled. I microwaved gas station burritos, propped a chair under the knob of the outside door out of habit, and tried not to think about the connecting door beside the dresser. At 2:07 a.m., someone knocked softly from the other side of it. The knock was polite. That was the worst part. Not pounding, not panic. 3 small taps, like someone trying not to wake a child. I sat up with my heart already going too fast. The room blew from the motel sign leaking around the curtains. Then a woman whispered, "Please, he's asleep now. Let me in." I didn't move. My first thought was domestic trouble. My second was Earl's warning. I grabbed the room phone and hit 0. The line clicked, hissed, and then played a recording of my own voice, flat and close to the receiver. I opened it. I dropped the phone so hard it bounced off the nightstand. The connecting doorknob turned once from the other side. Then, somehow, the knob on my side turned too, slow and steady, like somebody had a tool in the lock. I lunged across the room and jammed the desk chair under it, my palms slick, my mouth dry as sand. "Sir," the woman whispered, "please." Her voice sounded real, terrified, human. That nearly broke me. Then wet fingers slid under the door, pale in the strip of light, nails scraping the carpet like they were searching for my feet. I climbed onto the bed and called 911 from my cell, whispering so quietly the dispatcher kept asking me to repeat myself. She told me deputies were coming from the nearest substation, 40 minutes away. 40 minutes felt impossible. The fingers disappeared. A smell came through next, damp and sour, like old towels left in a closed trunk. I held my pocket knife in one hand and my phone in the other, watching the chair tremble against the door. Once, I heard a man cough on the other side, low and annoyed. Then Earl's voice came through the wall, muffled but clear. "Quit messing with him." Everything inside me went cold. The knocking stopped after that. No footsteps, no crying, just silence, so complete it rang in my ears. When deputies finally arrived, I ran outside barefoot, shaking hard enough that one of them made me sit on the curb. Earl stood by the office in sweatpants, acting confused, rubbing his eyes like we had interrupted his sleep. In the morning, he opened the connecting door for the deputies. Behind it was a brick wall. "There's no room 7, Earl said, looking at me like I was sick. "Never has been." Then my phone buzzed with a new video file. The video was recorded at 2:13 a.m. from my own phone, though I had no memory of making it. It showed me standing in the dark motel hallway outside room 6, barefoot, smiling at the camera with my eyes half open. Behind me, a woman's voice whispered, "He let me out." I vomited in the gravel. The deputies didn't laugh after that. They searched harder and found a crawl space behind the laundry room that ran along the back of the units. The brick wall behind my connecting door was fake from one side, built with a narrow service panel only staff could open. Earl had been letting people use that hidden space for years. Drifters, thieves, maybe worse. They found sedatives in the office coffee tin and a cheap audio recorder wired into the room phone. My voice had been clipped from the call I made to dispatch. Earl denied everything until they found my missing room key in his pocket. I left Nevada 2 days later in a rental truck, still smelling bleach whenever I tried to sleep. The company offered me another route the next week. I quit instead. People ask why I didn't open the door for the woman. I ask myself that too. Maybe she was bait. Maybe she was trapped. Maybe both things were true. What I know is this: fear changes shape when you survive it. Mine looks like a motel hallway, a locked door, and my own face smiling back at me from a video I never chose to make.